On today's Remington's Inside the Industry, I'll be joined by Chef Josh Schwencke, a guy that shares my own deep passion for the hunting lifestyle. Josh is also a man who has made a name for himself in the growing movement of folks who celebrate not only the hunt, but the ethical and healthy benefit that wild game provides to hunters and our families. Interest in the field to fork lifestyle is growing in America. And trust me, you are going to learn a lot from this master chef and hunter on today's show. This podcast is brought to you by Remington Firearms. For more information on the new era of Remington, visit our site at remarms.com. Right now, I'd like to welcome today's guest, Chef Josh Schwencke from Gastronomy Outdoors. Welcome, Josh. Really happy to have you on our podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much, Ken. I really appreciate it. Yeah, it's an honor to be on here. As soon as you reached out to me and told me about this, it was something I've been looking forward to for a couple of weeks now. So happy to be on.
Yeah. Well, you didn't seem to be that welcoming to me the last time I saw you. You know, it was like, oh, there's Darcy. Shit, I have to talk to him again. And I'm kidding.
You even talking about? What are you?
I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Look, the first time we met was at FTW on the very first new hunter program that Tim Fallon was doing, and you were there. I'm not sure. We might have. I don't remember if we met before that. I think that might have been the first one. So look, it's kind of interesting because that was the first time we met, and you were cooking up a bunch of wild game. But that's not your only thing, is it? I mean, yes, you're Gastronomy Outdoors, but you're not exclusive game. You're a chef.
Correct. Well, I mean, my bedrock is classic French culinary with, coming from culinary school and walking through that, and like a lot of chefs have, we started off in kitchens, and there's not a lot of game cooking in kitchens, unfortunately, in the U.S. And so what that did is that after a while of working in restaurants, I started my own company, and the company was really centered around, this is Gastronomy Live Events, which is just one arm of what we do. And that was really there to kind of teach, because my background in food history and culinary was really that bedrock, is to teach more of in-home cooking. And then where the hunting part came in was that there was growing up on a ranch here in South Texas and spending a lot of time out there in my youth, there was this resurgence of like, oh, you know what, I'm coming back to hunting. And it was always my foundation, but I slowly creeped back into it, met some amazing people in the industry like yourself and like Tim. And then it just went from there. I was able to take a lot of what I knew about butchering, a lot of what I knew about cooking protein, and implement a way of putting game into it and celebrating that animal and celebrating the sacrifice it gave, as well as the lifestyle.
You know, because most of the people, you talk to somebody that specializes in French culinary, and if you talk to them about game cooking, they go, "Excuse me, monsieur, why?"
Right.
Hey, look, I have a question that I have to ask you.
Sure.
I've lived in France before. I've spent a lot of time in Europe. Blah 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 blah. And one of the things, my questions is always, like, I'm a gluten nut. If I can get a good baguette, I think I've died and gone to heaven. Mm-hmm. Why can I not get great baguettes here compared to in Europe?
It has a lot to do with the sourcing of ingredients, right? Because there are a lot of bakers over here who get pretty close to that mark of what you're looking for, who will bring over a French oven, right? And they will do all the steps in order to get to the finish line of creating that really good baguette. And I'm sure you'd be hard pressed to find one that maybe fit that exact idea of what you think it is. But getting flour that is that type of that is that high quality, the water is different, right? Even the yeast spores, even if they use synthetic yeast or or anything else. Everything is kind of a marker of that flavor profile, and you can even get that even from the natural yeast that just happens to be at the in the bakery at the time. So two identical bakeries making the same exact ingredients will taste different on two different continents because the yeast in the air will actually lend itself to different flavors.
Oh,
Hopefully that
okay.
makes sense. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it does make sense because you see it on television and have for years and years and years. As long as whenever we were born, from then on, you see things and you see these little kids, from the villages in, I don't care where it's, Austria, Germany, France, Italy, wherever it is, walking around eating baguettes. Well, I was an adult and I was the same thing
Oh yeah.
because those damn baguettes are so good over there.
Well, of course. I mean, a croissant and the entire, that's one thing that the French do well, and among a lot of different things. And my background is German, and that's very much where I get a lot of my cooking influence from, not just from the French, but from my lineage. But that's the thing, is these different cultures do really, really well when it actually comes to these certain staples. And the French, they knock it out of the park when it comes to bread.
Yeah, they really do. What about the Germans? And by the way, sprechen Deutsch?
Not enough to
No.
not make a fool out of myself on your
Oh,
French.
okay. Okay, okay, thanks. Well, we don't want to do that.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
so,
My
so,
grandparents are not happy, I'm sure.
so what? I mean, what from your lineage? What are the Germans really specialize in? What's their
Well,
food du jour?
yeah, well, it's not. A lot of people will automatically go to meat preparation, sausage and the like, sauerbraten and stuff like that. But I really do think that a good ferment, and there are ways to add these elements into game cooking that aren't just as simple as just saying, okay, well, we're going to make everything we hunt, we're going to turn it into chili, or we're going to turn it into sausage. And we can do other things by making a really good schnitzel with it, or actually implementing the same type of thing and doing sauerbraten with a backstrap, or maybe another cut of Nilgai that will impart those same type of flavors, but we're kind of looking at it in a different light. But the fermentation, we were talking earlier about, obviously bread coming from France and everything else. The Germans know how to ferment. And so,
Explain that. Explain fermentation a little
sure.
bit.
So fermentation is really taking whatever might be at the peak or maybe just south of the peak as far as vegetables, and allowing them to essentially pickle. Here in America, we have a very A to B understanding as far as what a pickle is. If you ask a good 90% of the population in the U.S., hey, what is a pickle? They're going to point at a gherkin. They're going to point at a cucumber. When the majority of the world will look at it and say, you know what, sauerkraut is really kind of considered a pickle because it's pickled, and you can pickle carrots, you can pickle eggs, you can pickle so many different things by allowing microbes to do the work. You create a salt solution, you let the microbes do the work. They break down protein strands, they break down, different types of enzymes, and what is left is flavor. What is left is this really good bite, and and you'll see it other places. You'll see it obviously in Korea with kimchi. You'll see it in the Norwegians, and everything will ferment fish, and all these things are just letting nature take its course, and you get a much better product at the end.
Well, so at this point in time, well, first of all, I happen to, I spent a lot of time in Germany, and Austria. I love their food there. I find sometimes it gets a little rich, some of them, because of the sauces they use, but still love it.
Hmm.
But actually, I just love food. It's probably one of my great weaknesses in life. I eat way more than I should, and
Yeah, I
it makes it a
understand.
little more difficult to walk the mountains. Um, how did you? So you kind of explained a little bit, but what percentage of your um, cooking today is uses game meat versus traditional?
The percentage is actually growing, which I'm really happy about, because hunting is coming much more into mostly because of social media, right? So as much as I don't like social media, I have to kind of tip my hat to the portions of it that really help my business. And so on the other side of that is the fact that we are growing in that aspect. So right now we are right around 60/40. 60% of what we do is hands-on sushi courses, is doing a catering. We work within
Like,
local,
I mean, actual hands-on sushi.
actually hands-on. So it's kind of a crazy thing that happened is we started working in luxury apartment properties. I'm located here in South Texas in San Antonio, and we're having a population boom like you can't even imagine.
Yeah, all the
And
people from California moving.
very much so. But remember that you said that because they actually became a good portion of the game part of what we're doing. But I digress. What we are doing now is we have these massive luxury apartment properties of all these people who are coming into the state, are wanting the same, caliber of lifestyle they could afford maybe in New York, maybe in California. And so when they get here, we have these larger apartment properties. I mean, the rent is as much as your mortgage. I mean, it's crazy. But we have actually built a company around doing these caterings, like hands-on sushi courses, Texas beer tastings, California wine tastings, these type of things, all centered around giving a resident experience to the people who live within those communities. And so that is a large portion of what we actually do here in San Antonio. But as far as the game, we're growing more. We're actually seeing a lot more people who want these game dinners, or they want us to come out to their ranch and help them break down an animal after a day of hunting, walk through each one of these kind of necropsy courses and butchering in the field and all these other things. And then at the end of the night, we break bread over a fire with what they actually just hunted. And that's a story within itself, right? And so we see that a lot more. That part is actually growing.
Well, I think that there are a couple of things. First of all, everybody thinks when you look at sushi, everybody thinks that it's so damn easy to make. So a number of years ago, this was probably 15 years ago, something like that. I was the CEO of another company and in the firearms industry, and we'd go to SHOT Show, and every year I'd take all the staff that was there out to some kind of fun dinner. And I love sushi, so one year I thought, okay, let's see if we can go out for sushi. And we went to a place that actually everybody made their own. And I told her, because if you get 30 people, there's going to be some that love sushi, there's going to be some that
Right.
are okay with it, and there's going to be some that say, I'm not putting that in my mouth for anything.
Exactly.
But I told them, I said, look, give it a shot. Let's have some fun. Let me tell you, it was not easy to make,
Right.
because they taught us all how to do it. Everybody made their own, whatever it was. It just is not that easy. So it's interesting because if you ask most people, oh, do you think sushi would be easy? I'll bet you 90% say, oh yeah, no problem.
Right.
You get some rice, you get some seaweed, you roll something in rice, and everything's good. Not so easy.
Right. And that right there kind of is the angle that we're looking at, and not just in sushi but in game cooking, because a lot of the people who say, like the people you're speaking of, you know what, I don't eat sushi. I don't want to touch it, it's gross. Well, have you had it before? Yeah, I had it at a Chinese food buffet. Well, that means you've had bad sushi, and the same goes
Yeah.
for game, right? You have so many people who eat a conventional Western diet devoid of game. And then when you're actually speaking to them and you go, how much wild game do you actually have in your diet? So many of them are like, nah, none at all. Why? Well, because my uncle got this deer when I was young, and it was right in the middle of something called the rut, and it was a male deer, and it just had this weird kind of aftertaste. And yeah, well, that's because you had a ruddy deer, and you you started kind of in the deep end of the pool. And so that's really kind of what we're trying to do, is say, hey, if you can walk through this and learn how to make it in your home, that goes for sushi, or that goes for, a fallow deer steak, or whatever the case may be. There are those things that can kind of transcend your understanding of that and get you to where you actually enjoy cooking it.
Well, I think the other thing, though, at least for me, is that the thing that makes a steak great, like a beef steak great, is the fat in it. Well,
Yes.
in game we don't have that, And
Right.
look, my freezer's full of game, but you don't have the fat that adds to the flavor of it.
Hmm.
So what do you do now?
So there's many different options. So you can either cut it with fat. So that means implementing either beef tallow or pork. Let's say you're going to make a sausage. You can look at that equation of 70/30 or 80/20. That's trim versus fat, and you can actually add either bacon, or you can add pork fat. The other thing is beef tallow. If you want to add beef tallow, there's a little bit more of a richness, not as sweet. And then that's just implementation. But there's two other ways of actually doing it. And this is part of what we teach. There's larding and there's barding. And so one of them is larding is actually when you're actually going to wrap the outside of like, let's say it's a backstrap of an axis. You want to implement that fat. That fat equals flavor. So you wrap the outside of it with bacon. Okay, that's the larding process.
Well, look, everything bacon makes everything taste good,
Oh my God,
in
it's
my
the
in my
yeah,
opinion.
it's the
Unfortunately,
it's yeah, exactly. It's the duct tape of food, right? That's what everybody
yeah,
says. It puts
you know,
everything
and,
together.
and that's prevented me from living in the Middle East.
Yeah, no, I understand. And then the last part of the equation is actually called barding, and barding is actually using something called a barding needle. It's a large syringe, probably about a millimeter or two in diameter. You can get ones of different sizes, and you would actually stick that. Like, let's say you still have that loin, you have that. You can use a top round of a whitetail, and then you go in and you essentially rob a big side of fat back, like of pork, and you stick it straight in there and you close a needle. And what that does is every bit of fat that's inside that needle stays in there. And when you extract it, it stays. And then you will stick that into the protein, open up that needle, and then pull the needle out, and that line of fat will stay in there. So that way you naturally are creating marbling within the protein.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, look, I know I'd never heard of that before, but I mean,
Sure.
I know that I've done turkeys before, and I've inserted butter and sherry
Sure.
mixture of warm butter and sherry underneath the skin, and it adds to the moisture and gives some
Hmm.
great flavor as well. Um, but I hadn't heard I hadn't even thought of doing exactly the same thing,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Because I think I think that the one thing that prevents people from eating game, it largely is because it's so dry, and
Right.
people don't know how to cook it. I think that's the first thing.
Sure.
They don't know the tricks of moistening it,
Hmm.
and making it moister,
Hmm.
and a little bit more flavorful. And subsequently, I think people end up grinding it and using it for pasta or sausage or whatever it is, rather than making a good, using a good backstrap. I had an awesome backstrap when I was in Africa recently, and I would have never even thought of it, but we had a Cape Buffalo backstrap. It was
Ooh.
fabulous.
Yeah.
Never even thought of it. I also had, as we would say, zebra, but as they say over there, zebra.
Hmm.
And we had like zebra steaks, and they were freaking unbelievable.
Yeah, definitely.
And I had not eaten either one of those before, and they were really, really good. Not to mention the 8 gazillion other meals that we made. But when you go to places like Africa, they use the game meat for everything.
Sure.
And,
Sure.
and they figured out how to do it, but I think not so much in North America.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because what it is it's all about this term that we like to use. We coined it from somebody else, but it's the best cuisines in the world come from the most humble of circumstances. You weren't in Africa eating this at a, 5-star Michelin starred restaurant, with white linen and all the fixings. What you were there, you were experiencing this with the people who probably, and I'm just assuming, helped you hunt it and then cooked it and used it in a fashion that was celebratory of their lifestyle, which is very
Uh,
humble, right?
Absolutely. One of the evenings, the the chef is a young, look, everybody's young today.
Yeah,
It wasn't, 30 years ago, it wasn't the case, but today everybody's young.
right.
The chef there was a young guy, maybe 40, early, mid 40s, latest, maybe even early 40s. Um, had not been to culinary school, but grew up, cooking, working in a kitchen of a restaurant, learning to cook from the chef in a restaurant, and then just kind of went on his own and, was a sous chef, and then is now a chef at this company's hotel, as well as in their at their ranch, which is a 35,000 acre game
Right.
preserve, rhino preserve, and he just does some fabulous things. Well, one night, because all the African trackers, etc. So one night they did a meal that is generally a customary type meal that the Africans use for weddings and special occasions, which was
Oh, wow.
really, really unbelievable. But
Yeah.
it was, they used, what am I thinking of it? The joints of what do they call them? I'm just trying to think. The vertebrae joints.
Sure. Yeah. So the,
uh,
like the spine and the
yeah,
ligaments and everything, all the connective tissue.
yeah, but they did it. I'm just trying to think of what we get here. Anyway, they did it in a sort of stew with all kinds of vegetables, et cetera, et cetera, et
Mm,
cetera.
yeah.
And then you had a number of other dishes. Long and short of it is everything was eaten by your hands,
Of course.
because that's their traditional way,
Of
and it was
course.
just fabulous. But we had, the food was just exquisite. But you're right; It's not like going to a restaurant in South Africa or
Sure.
in Johannesburg or Cape Town or
Right.
Windhoek or anything like that. This is, truly cooked by the natives, and that's, they know how to cook the meat.
Yeah,
Well,
and it does go back to that point that you were talking about, is that you are with these people. You get to know everybody that I've ever heard talk about. I mean, I had a good friend of mine, Leo Jackson, who's a part of the family out at
yeah,
FW. Yeah,
I
Leo.
know, I know Leo, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah, and Leo just of course you do. Leo just got back from Mozambique recently, and while he was
Yeah,
in Moz, he was talking, and he was telling me firsthand, like, dude, some of the best meals. And it's something, it goes back to those individuals knowing how to not just break down the animal, but to braise it. It's long and low temperatures. It's stuff. It's a temperature and a time that lends itself to the muscle fibers becoming to the point where they fall apart. All the ligaments turn into gelatin, and we love gelatin. This is why we love ribs. This is why we love brisket, is because of that melting of that gelatin. And then you pair that with it being hunted in that terroir, with it within that area. There's a special extra ingredient added to it, and I think you just nailed it. It's the people making it, and this is something they've been eating for generations. This isn't some
yeah, they did. They
high end.
just didn't just start yesterday.
Right, exactly.
Well, I mean, most of the place that I was at in Namibia a number of years ago,
Hmm.
and the place I just recently was, most of the places, what they do, because when we go there, people from North America or Germany or wherever it is, go to Africa to hunt, we can't bring, yeah, we can import the horns or whatever we want, but we can't bring the meat back. I mean,
Sure.
it's really, you just can't. It's almost impossible.
Oh, yeah.
So what they do is the meat always goes to the staff. They pay them a salary but they also pay them in meat, protein for their families. And I know in Namibia they gave them 50 kilos a month per person.
Yeah.
So I mean that's a big deal. At 50 kilos, they go home with 50 kilos of meat.
Right.
That's a lot of meat.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And the same in South Africa. When I was just there, the tracker went back to the airport with me, and he got out and he had a big bag of meat. We dropped him off to take a bus to his home because he was 3 weeks in camp and 1 week out, and he had a big bag of meat with him. Well, that's their protein. They don't go to the local store and buy a $30 a pound or $50 a pound beef tenderloin or prime rib or whatever. They have game meat, so they learn to cook it really well.
Oh, absolutely. And depending on what part of Africa, a lot of them will, they braise their vegetables as well. They kind of a little bit higher from where you were at. They will do like sukuma wiki, which is like a kale and tomato and onions. I mean, these are all grown in that region for hundreds of years. And then they braise it and they cook it long and low. And then they'll do like fufu, which is like a plantain, kind of like a plantain powder, and all of those things go together, and they produce that meal just like you had. I mean, they're phenomenal at it. They just knock it out of the park. They really do.
Well, I'm terrible at it. I try to cook. So, maybe I need to text you more often.
Yeah,
but that's the other thing too that and for anybody, I have to say that you're very sharing with your recipes and how to cook stuff too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I lean more on the fact that I want, I kind of have a big world picture of the things that I feel need stewardship. And it's not just conservation, and it's not just, looking after our resources. It does go back to the fact that I want everybody to start cooking again. And so many things can be fixed by us just breaking bread together. We can, if you're eating properly, right, as you should have been taught, is if you're eating properly, that means your mouth is closed. If your mouth is closed, maybe you have a chance to listen. And if we listen to each other, maybe there's some things that we're missing. And I want everybody to take that knowledge and take it home. I want them to break bread over the dinner table. That's not happening as much anymore. And so we're lost on that. So I share these things, and I'm very big on, like, even at my caterings, people will come up and they'll be like, "Hey man, you did that duck fried rice last time you were out here at our property, and duck fat fried rice. What was that about?" I'm like, "Oh, give me your email and let me send you the recipe." This is not for me to keep. This is something that I feel is needed. And we built this company. We built Gastronomy Outdoors and Gastronomy Live Events with that being at the absolute core of what we're doing.
No, I think that's fabulous. Talking about cooking, because I'm a great cook, but I cook all the time. I love cooking, and if people, it does so much. First of all, when my children were young, and I know that you've met my son. He's not young anymore, and he's not small anymore.
Yes.
But when our kids were young, they, especially young men, they don't really talk about much. I'd ask our kids. I'd say, ask my daughter, "Well, how was school today?" And she would blabber on. I'd ask my son, and he'd go, "It was fine." Mm-hmm. But we had dinner, not formal, but we sat at the table for all our meals.
Yes.
There was no sitting in front of the television, stuff like that. Sitting around the table, guess what happens? Everybody starts talking. Right. I'd love it. But I don't think we're ever going to get the Democrats and the Republicans around a dinner table talking.
No, but we can get people who might associate themselves with those parties.
Possibly.
Yeah.
But, if people would kind of remember, we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we could listen twice as much as talk. But
exactly.
That doesn't usually happen.
Exactly.
But no, you're right. The other thing, too, that I think that a lot of people don't realize, or they realize it and they just don't think about it, but cooking yourself is so much less expensive
Yes.
than going out to eat. And people say, and I've read this and heard this, and it's just nothing but bullshit. There, where people say, well, we buy food from McDonald's because it's cheap.
Right.
Let me tell you, what a crock of shit that is.
Yeah.
I can cook something that is 10 times better than McDonald's ever serves.
Sure.
In my opinion, anyway. I have to say in my opinion because I don't want McDonald's suing me.
Yeah.
But it's just better and it's way cheaper.
Sure.
And you'll get meals that last a couple of days for not very much money.
Right. And there's two major pillars of what you just said. One of them is the fact of where is your cost allocated? Is your cost allocated? Yes. Yeah. So for me to feed my family and to produce everything pound for pound, side by side, the exact same thing, we could go, into town and have a hamburger at McDonald's or where have you. And pound for pound, I'm actually going to be paying less. But where is my money allocated? It's allocated on the back end. And what I mean by that is we have 8-year-olds with diabetes. We have people who have cancer more often than we have ever seen before. And the top killers of Americans are all dietary killers. They're all due to diet. So where is your money going to be allocated? Do you pay for it? You save money on the front end, but you pay so much more, and possibly your life on the back end. And I only have headlines to point to. Every day goes by, that articles will come out saying that more and more people are dying of heart disease. I lost my own father to a heart attack. So this thing's personal. And then I think the other portion of this is really the equity that you put into your food. That's something that we want to kind of drive home. And what I mean by that, and this goes back to us talking about breaking bread as a family. So many people, and this is with the wild game cooking as well as the in-home just conventional protein cooking, is when they say, I wish I could cook more at home, but what is stopping me is that I come across a recipe on Pinterest or I come across a recipe online, after scrolling and listening to this woman talk about all the ways that she loves making this recipe. If you've ever seen those recipes online, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And then you get to the very bottom and you see a bunch of ingredients on there that you necessarily don't have, but you don't really have the know-how of how to implement other things in the form of it, So you go to the store, you spend a lot of money, you spend time at the store walking around, getting spices and getting ingredients. And then you have those spices. Everybody has the little red spice brand in their cupboard from buying that one little container of an ounce of spice that they used once that they're never going to use again. And so they spend all this time and they make this meal, and then they're spending hours cooking, and then they sit for 30 minutes at the table to have their kids look at their phone the whole time, or maybe not at the table. And then they have to spend an hour cleaning up. So I understand their side of it, because where's the ROI with this? Where is the benefit for you to actually go through this process and end up on the other side going, yeah, you know what? I want to cook for myself more because this was a lot of fun. So that's really what we're there to do.
No, I get it. But you're right. But I hear people say all the time, I'm not a very good cook. You know what? Give me a break.
Yeah.
Look at our recipe. Follow the recipe. And, there's good recipes and there's bad recipes, or there's good recipes and maybe recipes that don't suit you.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not tough to follow a recipe, half a tablespoon of this, or half a teaspoon of this, a tablespoon of that, blah, 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 blah. Just not that difficult. And I'm like anybody else, or just like you said, I've seen the recipes that have spices that I don't have. So I go, screw it, I'm not going to make that.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll use the spices that I do have.
Right.
And sometimes, like I made something the other day because I've spent quite a bit of time in Turkey over the last year. I've been there 6 or 7 times. I love the food there.
Mm-hmm.
I think they do with their proteins. They just do a fabulous job. Kebab, everything. And
absolutely.
So, and one of their main things is lamb. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a big lamb fan. Like, I see people here, they rack of lamb, and I go, no, I think I'll pass. But I thought, geez, I really kind of want to add something. So I did a lamb recipe.
Mm-hmm.
and did the not the rack of lamb, but did a lamb shank
Oh yeah.
and slow cooked it for 3.5 hours. And, so there was one particular spice that I didn't have nutmeg. That was the only one I didn't have.
Oh, okay.
And because they used nutmeg, and then you slow cooked it with a couple of sticks of cinnamon, but I didn't have the nutmeg. But it still turned out fabulous.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
really, really fabulous. But I wish I'd had that nutmeg, because it would have just given that little tiny bit of flavor extra. But it was an easy one to follow, and it was
Sure.
I had everything. So I'm not a great cook by any stretch of the imagination, but I get a recipe, I follow the recipe, and more often than not, it turns out pretty well. But I am a great grill guy.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
But
I understand completely. I really.
well, that's what guys are supposed to be good at.
Sure. Sure.
Have you seen? Because we met before COVID, I think.
I think it
probably
was right after, because the first new
it
hunter.
might have been right.
Yeah,
after
yeah. The
that.
first new hunter was in 2021 or late
Yeah. Okay.
2020.
Yeah. Right. Then maybe did we meet before that? When was the first time you went to Fallon's place?
That was so I do a lot of culinary activations for another rifle company that you and I have spoken about. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Too bad.
Yeah, yeah. And only because they're
They're not my big competitors, so I don't really care about
Oh
them.
no, I understand, and but they are local. Their headquarters
Yeah.
are here in San Antonio. So we had a event out there, and so that was my chance to actually meet Tim Fallon and experience
Oh, okay.
FTW and Sam. And that'd be kind of, my goodness, because when we were supposed to be out there for that experience was that week in March that everything got shut down, and Tim's calling me, and I can't say enough good things about Tim Fallon and the entire
I'm
family.
I'm going to cut that part
Oh,
out
I
of
bet
this
you.
podcast.
I knew it. I knew you were going to do that.
Yeah,
And so
it's it's a must.
yeah. And so he called me, and he was just like, "Hey, bud, people aren't showing up to this thing. I hate to cancel, but we're going to have to." And he was so genuine with knowing that I was so excited about this. And then it wasn't too far after that, I think a few months later, that we had our first new hunter experience out there, and that's done a lot of great things for not just for FTW, with bringing those Californians and those New Yorkers from the coast, like we were talking about earlier, bringing them in and actually showing them how to source their protein sustainably. And I think you're right, it was that very first new hunter that you and I got a chance to meet.
You're right, and it was so freaking cold. It was unbelievable. I remember being out because there was a guy that. Well, first of all, what happened is, and look, you can call Fallon and do a fact check afterwards if you
Yeah.
like, because
Yeah,
because I was the one that told him long before that he should really do a new hunters. We didn't call it new hunters, but
right.
a program, because I said, for somebody that's interested in hunting, and really it was driven by COVID more than anything.
Yes.
Somebody that's interested in hunting has no idea where to go to learn how to hunt.
Right.
So they go, well, I guess I'm going to buy a gun and go someplace, but they don't know anything about it. And we talked about it, and then, he said, well, sure, let's try it out. And then I remember the first one, he called and said, geez, I don't think this is not working out too well, because there was hardly anybody signed up, only maybe 3 or 4 weeks beforehand.
Sure.
And all of a sudden it was full. And then before you know it, he's got like 10 or 12 of them in a year.
Right. Yeah.
Because I believe that COVID was one of I think there's two things that have happened here. I think that the desire for people to eat better, and in particular the younger people that have become very, very health conscious. So there's nothing healthier than field to table.
Exactly.
And so I think that's part of it. And the second thing is, all of a sudden people weren't able to get their favorite meats at the store and so on and so forth.
Right.
So I think there was a lot of new people that wanted to go hunting or did go hunting because of COVID. And I think it's I think it's stayed. I'm not sure that it has or not. But I remember that first one because there was a guy that wanted to go, and I said, sure, sign up, blah, 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 blah. And I remember we were out hunting, and he had never hunted, never even shot a gun before.
Right.
And it was so freaking cold up on the side of that hill with the wind blowing that one day. It was like being in Canada in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
Just a bitter cold wind.
Yeah, sometimes those Texas winters are much outside the realm of what other people from other states think that they are. They can hurt.
Yeah, no, it was nasty, but it was a hell of a lot better than the Canadian one that's minus 40.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
I mean, you can't even go outside.
Yeah.
What about birds?
Yeah.
Because I think that at least I can sort through the game meat, whether it be from a deer or whatever kind of deer, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But pheasant and chukar, quail, those are really challenging because it takes nothing to make them unedible, I think.
Right. So this is hopefully answers your question, but it kind of goes to game as a whole. So there's an apex, right? So if you have a graph and this graph as it climbs up is really the temperature and the cooking of this protein. And as it gets to the top of the apex, it reaches a point of diminishing value. And what I mean by that is what ends up happening is if you've ever met anybody who is kind of on the fence with game, and just like the Chinese or just like the sushi that we talked about earlier, you ask them, hey, have you had good game? No, I haven't. Well, why? Because it was undercooked or because it was overcooked. You have a little bit more to move with that apex at that point of diminishing value when the protein is cooked, and then you can catch it right at that perfect temperature that the texture is great. And with something like elk or something like nilgai or whitetail, you have different protein. The protein structure is completely different than it would be for a bird. And then birds are unbelievably lean. You think something like an axis or something like a whitetail or a coos deer is going to be lean. You're looking at like little to nothing, right? And so what ends up happening is you need to treat it in a different way. So a good roast or something like that. But then you also have other things like ducks. Ducks have a ton of fat, Sandhill crane is one of our favorite things to cook. And so that one, really good amount of fat, and that's why they call it what they do, the ribeye of the skies, is because of that fat that's on there. You have to treat that different than you would a chukar or a quail. And so you can spatchcock the birds open, and you can do them that way. But again, how are you implementing flavor through fat? And there's other ways of doing that. And to add a sauce, or maybe, like you said, you can inject it, or you can brine it. Brining it adds a ton of different flavors through osmosis and aromatics and everything else. So.
Fat's the answer. Send me a great recipe for pheasant, because
absolutely
I was out. I've got some nice pheasant that I got when I was out with DSC at their event, and and I haven't cooked it. By the way, have you cooked any of the halibut that Fallon brought back from Canada?
Not yet. So I saw the halibut and the cod in the freezer because I got text Danelle and Steve who are Danelle is obviously Tim's daughter.
Yeah.
She sends me a text and she was like, "Hey, they just got back from Canada and they got an ice chest full of cod and full of halibut, and let's go to town on it." So I'm like, I'm excited. So I'm out there quite often, obviously, and open up this freezer and these massive sides of halibut are sitting right there. we're going to do some. I gotta check your schedule next time you're out there. We need to line something up because I got some great ideas for, especially that halibut.
Oh, perfect.
That's
Perfect.
amazing.
Because, now next time you see Fallon, just remind him that I kicked his ass fishing. I got a 42 and a half pound salmon, and I think his was like a little dinky 22-pound halibut.
Yeah. So why would I go and stir up that hornet's nest? Why are you putting me in the middle of you two? You can just go tell him yourself.
Oh, I have.
Yeah,
I
I
have.
know.
But I just want him to know that everybody else knows as well.
Right. Oh yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it's always good. I'll tell Danelle too because she loves picking on her dad.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
You know,
They're great people. I mean, oh my God, I love them. Like a week goes by that I'm not able to talk to them. It's not a week well spent. I can tell you that. So they're good people.
so no, I know that you spend quite a bit of time out there.
Sure.
I'd asked Tim. We had a couple of different events, and I said, "Do you have any idea if Josh is available?" He said, "No, I know he's not."
Yeah.
So you've become a really busy guy.
I have. It's been really good. I've actually taken alongside all this the position with Wild Sheep Foundation and Gray and Renee Thornton and everything they're doing.
Yeah.
And so we're doing a lot of good with them with their Women Hunt program, which is really close to my heart. So, and we also facilitate that out at the ranch, and then we have our sheep show every year. So it's a big fun project.
Something just flipped through my mind. You're talking about the wild sheep. I know Gray, of course.
Oh yeah.
I've had a hard time getting Gray on the podcast because our times have just never quite connected. He's been very busy with the foundation and various hunts and stuff like that, and
Sure.
I haven't had time. And
Absolutely.
so on. No, I'm sorry. My mind just flipped away from
No,
what I
you're
was
good.
going to ask you. But so what would you say to somebody that is just kind of just starting, wants to cook more, wants to really get into it?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of, as a chef, and recognizing that the people at home are not going to be chefs, but I mean, if you were to say, what kind of tools should you get, what would you tell them to do?
I would tell them to start off with a practice first. And what I mean by that is we have a term in culinary called mise en place. And mise en place means everything in its place, right? And I don't watch much. I've watched little to no TV, especially not Food Network and all that stuff. That stuff is for a certain group of people. It's not really for me. I'm not entertained by that. However, if you do watch these shows, you notice when they're cooking, this celebrity chef might be up there and they're cooking and they're putting all the ingredients together from kind of an outfit of chopped ingredients that are centered around the cutting board. And everybody listening to this can imagine what I'm talking about. And that is mise en place. And that right there will be kind of the antidote to you going through what we talked about earlier, as far as spending all this time and not really, there is no boon, there is no benefit to you cooking and spending so much time doing all this to later just be like, this wasn't worth it. So to answer your question, I think that it's a matter of learning practices that will help you be able to put everything together clean as you go. And then the tools are also very important. I don't want anybody going out hunting with an inferior rifle or an inferior bow.
No, but no. Sorry for interrupting. I was thinking more about, look, how important is a great frying pan or a braising dish or
right.
a knife? Like, how critical are these? Is it okay to go out and buy a 1995 shitty frying pan, or do I really need something much better?
Well, you're going to get out what you put into it, right? So as far as pans, we use cast iron every chance we get. Not only do they last a really long time, but they're not that great of a conductor of heat, but they actually hold heat in really, really well. But again, there's maintenance on the backside of that because you can't treat it like you can an aluminum alloy pan. As far as knives, this is how I explain knives. If you are going to go out and actually go get a knife with some person's name on it. You're going to drop $300-400 for a chef knife that probably won't stay as sharp and as true, meaning as straight as you would like it to. You could allocate that towards maybe a craft knife. We do a lot of work with Montana Knife Company. Absolutely phenomenal people out of Montana. And then if you're not really in that price range, go to where the restaurants go to. Go to where chefs go to, because they have to have a good quality knife that is at a reasonable price, because they have profit margins to look after. So what I tell my students is if you're not going to go in this direction, go and probably spend $40 or $50 on one knife that's easy to sharpen, right? You treat it with respect. You don't put the knife in your dishwasher. You don't use a glass cutting board. People still have those. And you treat it with respect. And then that's what I would kind of lean towards is you find the ingredients and the tools that better suit what you have in mind, because if a $400-500 knife is worthless if you don't like the way it feels in your hand and it stays in the drawer the whole time.
And it's worthless if you don't sharpen it too.
Oh, sure, yeah. And teaching those things along with mise en place is how to maintain all these tools that you have and treat them with respect. Like I said, no knives in the dishwasher.
Yeah, exactly.
No glass cutting boards. Just treating every bit of it with the respect that it deserves, because if you don't, the best case scenario is you never use it. The worst case scenario is you lose a finger.
Yeah, no, that wouldn't be a nice thing.
No.
But I think you said something really important, is that you get exactly what you pay for usually. If
Yes.
you're going to, if you have, to my analogy earlier, if you go out and get a 1995 frying pan,
Mm-hmm.
you're probably going to get 1995 food out of that 1995 frying pan.
Absolutely. And you shouldn't be surprised that maybe the rivets fall out after a year, or that
Right.
it doesn't retain heat, or food sticking, especially protein sticking to a pan, is something that everybody thinks needs to. It's like a diet pill mentality, right? Well, I don't want to do the work and learn why this is happening. I just want to take a pill and fix the problem. And nonstick is kind of one of those things. There's so many pans out there that you watch infomercials that'll pop up on your social media that are like, "Hey, we made this new pan, and it's slick as glass, Ken. You have to buy like 10 of these things, and your steak will never stick." Well, I have a cast iron that
Steaks never stick.
yeah, it never sticks, because I treat it with respect. And not only that, I understand how protein works, and I understand that the protein is going to let me know when it's ready to be released from the pan. And I get so much more out of that than I would if I bought this $100 pan with 4 easy installments of $25.
Yeah.
And it doesn't translate to me, because the old school way a lot of times is the best.
Yeah, I've got one no stick pan that I make fried eggs in, because they're just easier.
Yeah, I understand.
Other than that, I shouldn't say I haven't mastered much of anything. I of course have some cast iron, but I don't use them that often. But
Sure.
certainly once in a while. I've got to cut it off, Josh. I think
Sure.
it's been fun chatting with you.
Absolutely.
What and on our introduction, when we do it, we'll put your website, et cetera, so that people know how to reach you. And if okay with you, if you'd like, I'm happy to put your phone number, however somebody can reach you.
Yeah,
if,
definitely.
If you choose, of course.
Yeah.
With Fallon, I tell everybody how to reach him. I give him his phone number, his personal phone number, his children's phone numbers, everybody's phone numbers, because I want him to have some grief and aggravation in his life.
I understand completely. Yeah, no, I give consent to all that. I think that's that's great. I can't thank you enough for having me be a part of this.
Just a second.
Just ask him to plug himself if you want.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
That's the way to do this.
Look, Josh, give yourself a little plug too.
Oh, absolutely.
Give some information about how to reach you, where to reach you, when to reach you. Send recipes, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And don't forget to send me a pheasant recipe.
I will do that. So do you want me to give
Yeah.
like a voice right now
Yeah.
of that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, great. This is Josh Schwencke with Gastronomy Outdoors here in South Texas. You can reach us at Gastronomy Outdoors on social media, and you can find us at www.gastronomycompany.com.
Perfect. Josh, it's been fun chatting with you. Let's stay in touch. I'll find out when you're out at FTW. Maybe Tim will allow me to come out. He tries to keep me away from most of the important people, but
Yeah.
he might invite me out.
I love it.
But look, it was great catching up with you, and I
Sir.
appreciate it, because one of the challenges that I think most hunters face is making sure that most everybody that I know anyway hunts for game meat,
Mm-hmm.
but are not everybody that I know enjoys the game meat, and I think 90+% of the time is because people have no idea how to cook it properly.
Exactly, and I think that's you just nailed down my market strategy. Like that right there is my reason why, and that's perfect. I love it.
Well, actually, interesting. Just before we go, there's one other thing too.
Sure.
Is that, because in Texas we've got such a proliferation of wild hogs,
Mm-hmm.
and hogs need to be different hogs at different sizes of the hogs. All hogs can't be cooked the same.
Right.
If you get a small little piglet, it's much different than that great big boar that you've got.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I learned that from one of the other chefs. So is that the same with elk, with deer, with others, or is that less true with them?
It is. So it is, and it's not. Mostly because of their protein structure and their fat. But when it does come down to like an elk, you're looking at much redder meat. So with red meat, because of the majority of what they eat are green leafy, plants, that is going to lend itself to much more of a higher iron content than it would be a pig, because pigs here in Texas eat snakes, they eat tubers, they eat anything they can find. If anybody knows anything about pigs, they eat everything they can find. So their protein is a little bit different. If they ate all greens and they kind of led that lifestyle, it would look a little bit different. But the smaller the animal in most things, I mean, look at veal and then beef, right? Or you look at a small pig is perfect for roasting on the bone. Those are phenomenal.
Right.
And then a bigger boar or sow will actually be better for sausages and grinding and those seam butchering that we like to teach.
Got it. Perfect. Yeah. Josh, thanks very much for spending some time with me today.
Absolutely.
It was informative for me, and I'm sure it's informative for everybody else.
Absolutely. It was fun. Thank you for having me on. It was an absolute honor.
Great. Thanks, Josh. Look forward to seeing you soon.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, man.